One of the most terrifying creatures in Native American folklore, I believe, makes its home pretty near our property. And this is just one of my many stories of run-ins that I feel like me and my family have had with these creatures. So tonight I figured I'd give you all a pretty creepy story that happened to me and my wife, Michaela. So when we started this place, there was almost nothing out here. It was just a blackberry farm, essentially. And this is supposedly where we're at in Seminole, Oklahoma, is supposed to be, I'm not allowed to say the word, but it sounds like Papua New Guinea. And it's the most horrifying creature in Native American folklore. This is supposed to be like its home. In fact, there's a house right down the road over in those woods. That's like an old decrepit house. No one lives in it. It's like in the woods, and it's known as the Papua New Guinea house. Let's just call it that. It's essentially like these owl creatures. So anyhow, they have power supposedly, and they can mimic things. And one night I was out here feeding the animals, and it was right before dark, just kind of how it is right now. Felt great outside, just right before dark. And I'm bent over, unlatching a chain for one of the enclosures. And my wife walks behind me, and I remember looking over, and like, this might sound silly, but I remember she was wearing like these little red like booty short type things, and I was always like, heck yeah, like it's my favorite pair of shorts that she wears. And I remember thinking that that's how much stock I took of like her walking behind me, and she was going down the trail, and she was going to feed some animals in the barn a little bit further down the trail. Now, this barn always creeps me out. It's not there anymore. This was like an old decrepit thing that was there when we first moved in here, when we were getting the place set up. And it was just like a temporary thing. But this thing was old. It was dark. There was no lights out there. And it was like getting pretty dark outside. So I remember thinking like, dang, I didn't want to go down there alone, you know. Glad she's doing that part. And I turn and walk back into our house. And when I walk back into our house, I open the door, kick my boots off. And there she is making dinner right by the stove. And I froze for a second, and I was like, how'd you get back up here so fast? Like, how did you beat me up here? And she looked at me just kind of confused and stunned, and she's like, I've been in here cooking dinner for like the last half hour. I don't know what to tell you. And she was not wearing the same outfit that I was thinking that she was wearing just a minute ago. Like, she's got on like sweatpants and a t-shirt. And I mean, I think she's messing with me. So I'm kind of like spinning out. I'm spiraling because we had already had some creepy stuff happen out here. I've talked about it in previous videos. I'll talk about it again if y'all want me to. But I was never like a real big believer in like all the Native American folklore stuff. My wife is Native American. And when I told her what happened, she's just like, no, like, do not go out there and do not go to that barn. And I was like, well, somebody's got to feed those animals in there. So, but she's like, right now you cannot go out there. That was a lure. That was a mimic. And it is trying to use your mind against you. It was wearing like her favorite my favorite outfit that she would wear. It was using my heart of like, normally I wouldn't want her to go down there by herself. Just weirdly enough, that day I went back inside, and she was like, something was trying to lure you to go down into that barn by yourself. That's off in the corner of the property. It's so far back in the corner of the property. If you yell back there, you can't hear anybody up front. Like, it's that far down in there. And it was just like this like creepy, just like overwhelming feeling of like dread went over me after that. And I was like, oh my gosh. And we've had countless weird experiences with what I think are those creatures. The most terrifying thing like in Native American folklore ever to me is that. So what do y'all think? I don't know if you've ever had experiences like that happen to you, especially if you're around in the Seminole, Oklahoma area. I would love to hear if you've had any of those kind of run-ins or incidences. And you can just drop them below. I would love to read them. If you have children and they're trying to tell you that they're seeing something, you need to listen, because what I'm going to tell you about tonight is one of the scariest things that's happening all across the world right now. It's called the phenomenon of the Hat Man. Now, the Hat Man appears in many different ways, but the creepy part is it doesn't really matter to seeing what culture is seeing it, like what kind of hats would be popular there. He's always been described as wearing a bowler hat or a top hat. And he's mostly after children, and he doesn't go after them directly. He apparently uses what's called a lure. So children will report to their parents over the course of days or weeks, saying that they are seeing another small child that keeps asking them to go play with them. And it's mostly in a kind of a secluded, area where you should not be going to play with anybody, or in awful weather, like when it's freezing cold outside. They're getting beckoned by another small child. And then when they go to try to play with that small child, they see the Hat Man lurking. And that's when they feel uncomfortable and they don't want to play anymore. and they tell their parents brush it off, and then weeks later, this kid comes up missing. This story is crazy. Like, whether you want to believe in supernatural stuff or not, look at the amount of stories that are out there where parents described this exact pattern. Their kid goes missing after weeks of them telling them that there's some man or figure they keep seeing in the woodline that has a child with them that wants them to come play with them. There's an astonishing amount of these exact stories you can look up right now. But this lure is the creepy part. Is this some other spirit or, whatever that he's captured, or is this just some pure figment that, he could be emitting out there to, kind of like an anglerfish with a light, to, lure something in? And if one kid goes missing, are they now doomed to be the next lure for the next kid? These Hatman sightings have been going on, reported all the way back from the late 1800s, but it seems like in the last 20 or 30 years, they've really ramped up, and Hatman has been appearing everywhere all across the world. There's even a famous football player that actually stopped mid-interview and then started telling his story about how when he was in South America, he thought he saw the Hatman, and now he sees him everywhere all the time, because it doesn't just go after kids. Hatman is not against going adults, and when he goes, for adults, he doesn't use lures, quote unquote. And it seems to be what's known as a fear eater when they go for adults, just something that's going to feed upon your fear and anxiety, and there's no ever end result conclusion like going missing or anything. It's just, it wants you to be in this heightened sense of just being terrified all the time. This is the story of the weeping woman, and it's one of the scariest stories out here in the West, and also down in Mexico, where it's known as La Llorona. Now, if you ever encounter the weeping woman, it's mostly when you're driving down a highway or an interstate. You are supposed to stop and turn around and go the direction you just came from. Because if you cross her path, that means that death or bad omens are sure to come your way. Now, in the United States, people often report seeing a woman on the side of the road that looks like she needs some help. She's crying or she's distressed, but when you stop to help her, she actually has no face. She looks just like an ordinary woman, but with absolutely no face. Her hair is mostly draped in her face, and she's mostly described as wearing like a lot of white clothing instead of like the dark black clothing. Now, some odd things associated with like La Llorona or the weeping woman is that the deaths are mostly attributed to drowning, which weirdly enough, most people that report seeing her is when it's raining. So when you see that woman distressed on the side of the road and it's raining, and then she turns to you and she has no face, if you don't leave and go the same direction you just came from, it's expected within the next few days that a loved one will pass away or have a serious accident. And I just got like some major chills and like almost kind of sick to my stomach, because one thing about La Llorona, or the weeping woman, is you're not supposed to speak about her too often because it does draw her near, especially if you have children. That seems to be the thing that most people report that she's after. The weeping woman supposedly has lost her children. Oh my God, I'm getting freaked out talking about this out here. She supposedly lost her children, so she's after people who have children. So if you don't have any children, chances are you've never seen or heard of this phenomenon before. But to those of you that have children, this is like the entity out there that wants nothing more than to take your kids and nurture them in her own way in the afterlife. Tonight we're going to talk about one of the creepiest phenomenons that's reported all over the world, especially here in the United States, and actually in really populated areas, and that's the dark-eyed children. Okay, if you haven't heard of the dark-eyed children before, they mostly take the form of a child, and they have soulless dark eyes. These creatures, these beings, are supposedly incredibly intimidating and menacing. Even though they might present themselves as a child, people who come in contact with them report just this overwhelming fear and this overwhelming dread and just this sense that they're just like in the presence of a predator. Okay, now the dark-eyed children mostly aren't going to just come out and attack you from people that have interacted with them or claims to have interacted with them. It seems like they always want to try to lure you out of your home, which kind of goes back to the old, lores and tales of vampires about how they had to be invited in. If they can't come in, they want you to come out. Okay, some classic stories about dark-eyed children is getting a knock at your door early in the morning or late at night, and extremely pale child at the door. They mostly try to keep most of their body covered up with hoods or scarves or sunglasses, and they're going to want to invite you outside, and they're going to pretend that they need help, that there's some kind of a danger going on. Now, the other ones that people report are talking about in parking lots. Okay, they'll see like a pretty empty parking lot, kind of like a Walmart late at night, and there will be some kid that appears to be like kind of crouched down or maybe in the fetal position or kind of crying. And when somebody pulls up to help them, the kid looks up and they see those dark, soulless eyes, and then immediately they no longer look like they need help. They immediately look like they're very, very intimidating and they're after you. Okay, there's a lot of theories on this, on whether this is even a real thing, obviously, but it seems like they don't really want to like take you or hurt you. It's almost like they just want you to be afraid, and they just get that fear. And that goes back to tons of different legends about creatures called fear eaters, which present themselves in many, many different ways. If you ever want to look up a classic fear eater story that was reported massively before modern technology, look up Old Green Eyes, and it was actually during the Civil War. Tons of Civil War survivors talked about how after there'd be extremely bloody battles, they would see what a creature they would call Old Green Eyes, which was just a lurking dark shadow that seemed to crawl across the ground, and it would stay next to soldiers who had been mortally wounded, and they're terrified because they know they're about to die, and it would almost be like getting that energy from that. Dark-eyed children seem to be the same way when people talk about them. The most famous story of a dark-eyed children attack, if you will, was in Abilene, Texas. There was a journalist named Brian Bethel that was reporting on a news story there. So this is how the story got out and got so big. This was back in the 90s. He was reporting on a news story. He was packing his stuff, getting in his car, ready to leave, when there were two children approached his car in a parking lot. And at first, he's got the windows up and everything, and they approached the car and they were asking for spare change. And he's like, no, go on. And then he noticed that these kids had completely dark, soulless eyes, and their voice felt like it changed, like in its tempo and its range. It went from a childlike voice to a very deep and powerful, manly voice, but these were small children. And he said they kept yanking on the door handles, and they were trying to get him to open the doors any way they could and preventing him from leaving by standing in front of the car. But they were no longer asking for change. They were just making these crazy threats on his life. And he said that he had such an overwhelming fear that he almost passed out. He almost lost consciousness. And he said it was almost like they were draining his life. Like the more he got upset, the more he got worked up, he said the weaker he actually felt before he just ended up punching the gas and going. He said that he looked in the rearview mirror and all of a sudden they're gone. I mean, he's just several feet away from where he was just at, and there was no trace of him left. Brian Bethel, Abilene, Texas, 1996, if you want to look up that story. He was a renowned journalist. He never did any kind of reports like this ever again or before. He was not like a ghost guy or anything. He was just your regular old news journalist. So it's really neat that, I don't see why he would make this up. In fact, it would probably only hurt his career to make this up. But I definitely do believe if there was something out there that wanted to make you have your guard down, the best way to present itself is that of a child. There's nothing in there. What is the government trying to hide with the no-light zones inside of some of the national parks on the American West? Now, the reason why I say the American West is almost all no-light zones only exist on the western side of the United States. There's only one no-light zone on the East Coast. All these no-light zones are almost always in the desert, okay? Now, at first appearance, a lot of people say, well, no light zone is just for nature. It's just to enjoy the beauty of it. So there's no light pollution, and we keep it like how it was thousands of years ago. I could take that at face value, but when you look into these laws of the no light zone, it goes way further than no light. A lot of these zones are actually no light, no mechanic zone, and that means that you can't use any kind of machinery either, even if it doesn't emit light. Like you can't use things like chainsaws or anything with a motor. So even a bike with a motor on it is against the rules. It's not emitting light. How this gets even deeper of the reason why I think there is some kind of conspiracy going on here or something that they are not wanting us to know about is in these no light zones. There are some areas in these no light zones that it is so strict that if you need emergency evac, even the rescuers have to get the approvals to use lights to come and rescue you. That means if they know that you have fallen down a canyon and you have snapped your legs at both of your kneecaps and they know they need to get you out of there, they have to still get special approval to fly a helicopter in there or to use a vehicle to get you out or to produce light at nighttime. Where the conspiracies come in is there some kind of creature that lives out there in the desert that is drawn to the light or drawn to the noise of machinery. Okay? You start talking about skin. We don't say this. My wife is Native American. She does not let me say that word out loud, especially out here, in our neck of the woods. But a SW could be very drawn to a light because out there in the desert, it could oftentimes be flat for very, very, very far, or you can see the smallest light source. I mean, I was in the Grand Canyon one time and we were in a no light zone. Somebody turned on a light anyhow. And I mean, I had to estimate they were miles away and I could see them like that. I mean, it was so easy to spot them. It was just a little red light and it was on for just a few seconds. And I mean, it was like my eyes drew right to it. So I can't imagine if there was some kind of creature or some kind of group out there that would be drawn to that, they would want you to have the lights on. Next, you go to these like weird conspiracies like, is there no machinery because that's vibrations? And then you get into the weird stuff like, you know, the sandworms on tremors and like the really weird stuff. But here's the one that I'm intrigued about. In no light areas, like I said, I could see that light in the Grand Canyon real easy. You start getting to the UFO stuff. Could somebody theoretically go into this desert where there's no light so your light would stick out really good and you could almost communicate in some way or, you know, draw them in by flickering these lights? Because out in the American West, that's where like almost all of the super iconic UFO incidences happened. I mean, you're talking about like Roswell and, you know, the whole Area 51 stuff. All that stuff is out there. Is that another reason why they don't want machineries or lights? Is because they have secret, you know, bases out there like Area 51, and any kind of machinery might be able to detect them or disturb some kind of study they're doing underground. There's so many, I mean, the possibilities are endless, but these no light zones, what got me and what made me really think that it wasn't part of like just experience nature is that if somebody's hurt, you have to get permission for the rescuers to come get you. Like, to me, that is so wild because I'm pretty sure that nobody would be offended that like a helicopter came in to rescue somebody that like almost snapped themselves in half from falling down a cliff or something. I don't think anybody's going to be upset about that. But yet, they still have to take special protocols for that to go happen. Strange. This is one of the only cases that is documented that a whole town was evacuated because of a monster, and the monster they claim that plaguing the village was Bigfoot. And this wasn't like hundreds of years ago. This was in 1950. And it was called Portlock, Alaska, and it is still essentially abandoned to this day. Now, the reason why they abandoned Portlock because of this monster was tons of people were turning up missing, and a bunch of people were talking about seeing like a ton of these creatures in the woodlines, stalking them. This village was mainly a fishing village, and it was also a nice little port to be able to trade goods. And it has been studied multiple times on like just the freak things that had happened there. And one thing's for sure, tons of people disappeared and tons of people were murdered. Now, was it a Bigfoot or was it a serial killer? Was it some kind of pack of grizzly bears that had like rabies or some kind of like tweaked brain, kind of like the lions attack in Africa when they were building the railroads that killed over 200 railroad workers, or one pack of lions, one, you know, pride of lions? Who knows? Who knows? But here's some facts that we're going to go over. A research study team went in there in the 1970s and immediately were harassed and targeted by rock throws. They could not figure out who was throwing these rocks or where these rocks were coming from, but they were getting large-sized rocks thrown at their boat before they even made it into the dock. Essentially, after that happened, they did not want to dock at all, so they tried to study from the water. The rocks became so prevalent and so often that it was too dangerous for them to stay on the boat, and actually the captain of the boat was afraid the boat was going to get damaged if they stayed much longer, so they ended up having to leave. They didn't even make it one night into this research. The post office was the last remaining official building there in 1951, and by that time, essentially, if you went out into the woods, it was guaranteed you weren't coming back. Like that's how often people are just disappearing, just left and right. So was it a serial killer that was just using these woods that knew that there was essentially no police force up there or very limited police force? It was investigated by the U.S. Marshal Service, and they never could find any bodies. That's the other creepy part about this is even if it was like a bear attack or something logical and explainable, there would be signs. There wasn't any. It was like these people were just vanishing. I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, but the Native American tribe that was there was the Alotique, and they warned the settlers about this beforehand. And they warned the settlers that if they ravaged the land, this raft would occur. And essentially, as soon as there was commercial lines set up and, you know, like heavy traffic set up, that's essentially when this happened. The Alotique had lived there for hundreds of years, for centuries, without incident. And they warned, hey, if you overfish this area, this is what's going to happen. And sure enough, it did. Disappearances got so bad that the Native American people that lived there, the Alotique, they also left. Like, they left at the same time everybody else did. If you like this kind of creepy stuff, we don't know why you're not following the page. We do it every night. Were dragons real? And while we might not ever know, the possibility is actually very high. Now, the first thing I always get is like, where's the fossils? Where's the fossils? Wouldn't we find them? Probably not. They would probably just look like dinosaur fossils, because bird wing fossils are one of the hardest fossils to ever find because they're hollow, they're lightweight, they mostly get crushed, they don't preserve well. So a lot of dinosaurs could have had wings and we wouldn't know about it. There could have been a lot of creatures that existed that we wouldn't know about because their bones would not fossilize very well. Just like how most modern birds, the future will not know about unless, we write it all down. So if somehow all the records get destroyed, most modern birds the future won't know about, especially flamingos. Next is they couldn't have breathed fire, right? Well, we do have animals today that can make fire. The bombardier beetle can actually make a spark of fire come out of it. For its size, it's a pretty big burst of fire. It's as big as its own body size, essentially. Here's a photo of it. So it can create fire, okay? It wouldn't be that big of a stretch if it could do something like the bombardier beetle did, which actually clicks together a hard shell at the same time it excretes some acid from its body, which makes this big burst of fire, okay? If you scale that up to something the size of a dragon, it would look like it's breathing an absolute flamethrower out at you. Now, here's some facts that we do know. Is pretty much every civilization that ever existed has stories of dragons or a dragon-like creature, okay? Especially the medieval ones, but, the Japanese culture, the ancient Egyptians even had stories of dragons. Now, they could have been finding dinosaur fossils because we didn't technically know that dinosaurs were a thing until after George Washington had died. That's right. George Washington had no clue that dinosaurs even existed. Dinosaurs were not officially recognized by science until 1842, so well after America was founded. So that's just kind of a wild concept to think about. Now, sometimes we could think that these people might have thought there was dragons and stuff because there's been tons of ancient temples and ancient drawings and text that refer to what is believed to be dinosaur fossils. In India, in ancient Rome, there was actually several temples found with dinosaur bones in them, and I'm sure, that is not a jump of imagination to go, they probably saw that and thought, oh my gosh, this thing probably died recently, not knowing that this was something that died literally millions of years ago. So, all in all, to recap, were dragons real? We'll never know. But their bones probably wouldn't have fossilized. 2, every civilization has stories of them, but were they just finding dinosaur skeletons or dinosaur fossils? Who knows? And knowing that an animal that exists right now today that you could go find out in the wild can replicate fire breathing, it's not a stretch to say that another animal could do it too.